Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Hello, welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have Kirk in the Escape Pod with us today. We are chatting about the latest Bad Batch episode as usual. This one is episode 8 from season 3. It's called Bad Territory, and it was directed by Nate Villanueva, written by Matt Michnovitz, names that you've heard before as we've gone through the Bad Batch now on our final season. This is the final season of Bad Batch, season 3. And technically in the series, I believe this is episode 40, so we're getting there. Before we dive in real quick, if anyone's watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. That way you don't miss a beat. And definitely if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us those 5-star reviews. It really helps us out, helps the algorithms, helps other people find the show, all that stuff. And big thank you to those sharing the podcast. So let's dive right in and talk about the Bad Batch.
Another happy landing.
Hello there, Kirk.
Hello there, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back. And we had an episode this week which saw the return of Fennec Shand, played by, totally forget her name now. Mulan.
Oh no. Mulan, that's right.
Mulan. I always just think Mulan.
Ming-Na Wen. That's
yeah,
right.
Ming-Na Wen. Thank you. Yeah, I would have remembered that any other day of the week. Could just,
She's
totally
the perfect example for how I would like to look when I am her age, because she's notorious for looking very good.
Oh, dude, it's unreal. Like, just like how good she looks, like for her age. I was like, every time I see her, I'm like, man, she hasn't aged a day. Like, dang.
She's 100% taking death sticks, like just like some variation of that makes her look good.
Yeah, or she's like part of the Night Sister witches or something. Black magic making her look that young.
Yeah, probably. So she did. So she did voice Fennec Shand in the Clone Wars as well. I actually wondered if they had another actress playing her, but there you go.
Yeah, Bad Batch. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll read the summary here. We can just chat about the episode briefly, and then we got some quick Star Wars headlines to get through, and we're going to chat a little bit about the Acolyte trailer, which came out earlier this week, only because I didn't get your 2 cents on it earlier. We had a bit of a recap, myself, Bryce, and Blake, just talking about the Acolyte trailer. So anyone who missed that episode, definitely go back and listen that out, check that one out. We just talk about the trailer, things that we're looking forward to, stuff like that. But I do want to get your 2 cents. We'll bring that up before you jet. But here we go. Bad Batch. This is Bad Territory, episode 8. Fee, who has been asked by the Bad Batch to make inquiries about the Empire's M-Count project, reports that bounty hunters have been hired to search for subjects featuring that special trait. Believing that Fennec Shand may know the answer, Hunter and Wrecker decide to seek her out, leaving Omega and Crosshair on Pabu. While Shand knows nothing herself, she refers them to another bounty hunter who might, in exchange for helping her capture her current target, Sylar Saris. After an arduous hunt, they bring Saris down, but Shand secretly betrays the batch. On Pabu, Crosshair refuses to talk about the trauma he's endured on Tantus, which impairs his sniping skills. Omega helps him overcome his handicap by teaching him meditative techniques. And there we go. That was it. It was a bit of a interesting hunt, I guess, watching Hunter and Wrecker actually, try and go after a bit of a slippery, slimy target. Looks like he's rigged in the entire swamp to blow if anyone gets close to him, and they disarmed those mines with ease. What do you think about this episode?
I watched the last 3 episodes all back to back, and it definitely feels like this whole season is around Omega and Crosshair. I feel Hunter and Wrecker just going on their action-packed adventure with all the character development reserving for Crosshair, which I guess makes sense because we haven't seen much of Crosshair for the last one. Darren was right. A lot of it's not really physical pain in Crosshair's arm. It's or in his hand. It has to do with his with what's in his mind. So I thought that was an interesting one, and it makes me wonder what else they did to him as well on Tantus.
Right. Yeah. Totally. I agree. I mean, I thought that was pretty enlightening, and I like how where we're going with that character. It's not something that they've really approached a whole lot in the past. There's not a lot of clones suffering from the PTSD, but we do get a glimpse of that in Star Wars Rebels. Now I know I forget. Have you seen Star Wars Rebels? I don't think you have, right?
Yeah, no. I actually last year I recently finished the whole series just before Ahsoka because I wanted to finish it up before Ahsoka.
Gotcha. Okay. Right. Okay. So minor spoilers for people that haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, but I think it's Commander Wolf who shows up again in Star Wars Rebels down the road, right? So what we've seen already with Rex and Wolf's first interaction in this show was pretty cool to see the link, the line being drawn between those two shows, but when Wolf encounters Kanan and Ezra in season 2, I think it is, he's got this whole sort of moment where he's like, ready. He's like firing the blaster, and then Rex stops him, and he's like, Wolf, it's okay. Like, the Jedi are okay, remember? And then he's like, oh yeah. He's got this moment of like trying to collect himself again because like the PTSD of the Order 66 like chip and everything that he's been through, it's obviously had an effect on him, right? So
does he still have his inhibitor chip in his head at that point, or was it removed and it just kind of like trail on effects? I couldn't remember.
I think it was still in. I think he did follow through with the orders because he was Plo Koon's captain or commander, right? And I mean, even Rex succumbed to it. It wasn't for Ahsoka, like who saved him essentially, right? But like he never Wolf never knew about it until after, and I think a lot of the clones in the Bad Batch, at least the picture that they've tried to paint for us is that some of them have started to wake up and realize kind of what just happened. And I'm sure at some point Rex might fill Wolf in as to what it was and how Order 66 was accomplished, but in the meantime, I mean, the order is done. He's had some time to kind of get back to his old self again. He's, got his own, he's got control back over his own mind. But I think they're all human beings still, and they've all lived through like this crazy war. And so it's always cool to kind of see them being a relatable person, right? Like Wolf kind of even 20 years from now or 19 years from now or 18 years from now, whatever it is like, still kind of dealing with that pain and the trauma of war, right? And so like this is really nice to get into a character like Crosshair, who's he's such a badass character, elite sniper, special abilities, all that stuff, but he's not a superhero who's like just kind of immune to emotional pain or anything like that. He's such a calloused character. And I think that's the irony, right? Like such a calloused character, we're seeing him be the one to have to deal with all this mental, these psychological barriers that prevent him from being the best he can be. And I think he's the perfect like choice to do that because he's the one who betrayed his friends. He's the one who like underwent all that crap in Tantus, with the experimentation stuff. He was thrown in a cell, like he killed an Imperial officer. Like he's done a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like that we just kind of that makes him probably one of the best characters in this entire show. So like it's neat to kind of further that with the fact that this thing isn't just some simple like genetic deterioration or anything like that. It's like this is all in his head, and I hope it stays that way. That it's like psychological thing because like I think it just adds complexity and richness to this character and makes it him somewhat of a relatable guy. You know what I mean?
And I quite like how Crosshair is like his redemption is kind of being enabled by by Omega. So without Omega, he'd still be in the cell, and as he said at the start of the season, like he would, if he had the chance to escape, he wouldn't take Omega with him. Mm-hmm. And although I think it was in the last couple episodes, which you guys definitely covered, but there was I remember I think it was the previous episode from this one when the clones went up to Crosshair being like, "Oh, you've changed," or maybe they didn't say you changed, but they said to him, "Oh, like you've gotten quite close to the kid now."
Right.
So I thought that was that's also another little beat that they're sharing with those things. One thing I found really interesting about this episode, or not necessarily interesting, but watching this along, you know how the characters, or Hunter and Wrecker, they've gone to see Fennec, and they're asking Fennec, you know, what's M count? Like, what's this M count thing? And I'm there like watching the screens, like it's like those moments where you're screaming at the screen when like you know what the answer is, and the characters don't know it yet because obviously we're watching other parts of the show,
right?
And then it's interesting that like if we didn't know what M count was, like we as the viewer would be quite invested, like, oh, what is this M count now? But like we obviously know where it's all connected to it, so it's funny to watch these characters run around and try to figure things out that we already know.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great point to bring up because the ongoing debate is, what do you start with now? Like when you enter the story of Star Wars, what's an entry point to you, right? And like the answer for me is pretty easy. It's the chronological viewing order of the Skywalker saga, and then going back and filling in the gaps with all the TV shows. So that's just the way that I would probably.
Now, when you say chronological viewing, do you mean like release time, or do you mean?
No, I mean story. I mean like start
off with
the Phantom Menace and like go up from there. So like that's my personal like favorite. I know Blake and Bryce would probably opt for release order. They would probably go original trilogy, then prequels, and then sequels. And then I don't know where you.
So my question from that is like if someone's watching Star Wars for the first time versus you rewatching them, how would you recommend doing that order? Because I've got a hot debate on this one.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever chatted about this. I mean, I've talked about my opinion a number of times on this podcast, but I don't think I've ever heard yours. So in short, mine is I would start with the Phantom Menace, and the reason why is very straightforward. It's very simple. Anakin's betrayal and the downfall of the prophesized chosen one, I think, is a much bigger surprise than the Luke Vader relationship, because there are so many people who know that Vader is Luke's father, and it's like a pop culture like meme at this point. Like anyone who's probably not even seen Star Wars like knows the reference, right? And I don't know if those same people know the specifics that Anakin is Darth Vader, because that's a much less specific thing. But it's so funny, like my wife, like I got the Star Wars Trivial Pursuit game from Amazon. It encompasses 7 films out of the 9 Skywalker saga films. This is the last Trivial Pursuit that they released for Star Wars, and it was like when The Force Awakens came out. And it's hard to find now because like they've been out of production for a number of years, which is why I jumped on it when I found one. But I came across a question which was, what does Qui-Gon say, or what does Shmi say to Qui-Gon when Qui-Gon asks Shmi about Anakin's father? And the answer is, as you know, there was no father. And that's the quote, right? And her response was hilarious. It was like, is he a loser? Or like, is he like... Is he like dead, or like she legitimately could not remember? And I kid you not, she's seen this movie like at least 4 or 5 times. And not to mention me like in the house, like living and breathing Star Wars every day. Like I couldn't take her seriously, and I was like, no, is this like you're serious? And she's like, yeah, I'm serious. And I was like, dang, okay. Well, the answer is like there is no father, and she could not believe it. She's like, wait, what? Like there's no father? And I was like, man, like there's definitely some things that definitely slip by people, I think, as if they're not obsessed with these movies like we are. There's certain things that kind of slip by, and I think the fact that Anakin is Vader is not as common to know as the Luke is the son of Vader, right? And so I think the best way to watch the movies is to be blown away by the fact that this guy has literally made a deal with the devil for the sake of his wife, who's supposedly supposed to die in childbirth. And he gives himself to the dark side for that. And I think that's probably the biggest surprise and the biggest like turning point of the series. And I like first timers to see that first, before they kind of continue with the story. At least that's my own opinion. I think a lot of the reason why people would watch release order is probably because they grew up watching it in that order when the saga wasn't yet complete. And so that's the way that they enjoyed it, and that's the way that they want to share it with other people. But if you ask George Lucas, like, how should you watch the movies that he made, he'll tell you start with the Phantom Menace. So I'd like to hear your opinion now, because like I'm always very curious of Like, would you start with episode 8 or episode 9? Let's get the worst out of the way.
Straight off with episode 9, and we'll go from there. Yeah. No, it's interesting because watching what you said is quite in line with how I felt a while ago, because I've only had the opportunity to introduce Star Wars to someone that has never seen it before once, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone else that I know has kind of know Star Wars and everything. And I had the 6 collection of all the DVDs. I think this is like a few years ago or so. And I gave my friend that collection. And I said to him, start with the Phantom Menace first. So the same order that you're describing, and work your way through. Because mainly I wanted to, it was a little bit selfish, but I wanted to see his opinion on what it's like watching it like that. Because what movie trilogy or what movie series or anything starts off with the good guy completely turning to the bad guy and there not being any redemption arc in the first like three movies? As like that just doesn't happen. Like, everyone wants a good guy story. You don't expect it. So that I had the same kind of feeling. And I think that's fascinating because when do you ever see the great, one of the lead characters turn like that? And then go, spoilers if you haven't seen Revenge of the Sith, but I think it's been plenty of time by now. Yeah. But when do you see the other main character cut up the other main hero in half, and then the movie just ends? Like, it's pretty dark the way it all goes, and you don't expect it. So that's why I suggested to him. And then he got to episode 5, and then the whole reveal was like, Luke, I am your father. Or what's the actual line? I think there's like there's that Mandela effect where it's like, no, I'm your father.
Yeah,
whatever that line is, that big reveal.
Yeah. It's no, I am your father. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No, I am your father. And I remember as soon as he finished that movie, he's messaged me being like, why is that such a big deal? Why do people talk about that a lot? Like, it was obvious. Mm-hmm. Like, I just watched 3 episodes of Anakin turning into Vader, and then this happened. So, and I said to him, that's because people typically like watch episode like 4, 5, and 6 first, and then they go back to 1, 2, and 3. And then he got really upset at me. He's like, what? So you just made me your test dummy? I'm like, oh, kind of.
Yeah, but
the way you describe it there, like, it makes sense. Like, everybody knows that line, right, no matter whether or not you've watched Star Wars.
Yeah.
So like, it's not that big of a shock. So
it's on bumper stickers.
I also wanted to say that. So I'm exactly. So I'm kind of in two minds about it. I think it's still a really enjoyable series going from 1 to 6, albeit, like, as much as I am a massive prequel fan, there are some moments in episode 1 and 2 dialogue wise which make it be like, okay, why is this a pop culture icon type of thing?
Right.
Like, I would still recommend going from, and being that I think the original trilogy is like more widely accepted as being 3 films that at least don't have too many speed bumps along the way. But yeah, I would still go and say, even all of that, I would still go and say watch episode 4, 5, and 6 first, and then go back to 1, 2, and 3. But it then, going back to the Bad Batch here, it kind of has that effect. When you do it in that original release order, you kind of know what is going to happen, mm-hmm, and you know where everything leads, and you know that Anakin has a redemption. But if you're going into all of this fresh and stuff, I think it's more entertaining.
It is, yeah, it is. And here's the other thing is, like, if you throw the sequels in the mix now that they are part of the greater Skywalker saga, love them or hate them, they're part of this 9-episode saga now, right? And it's just, to me, the ending of episode 3 is such a great segue into episode 4. It just makes no sense to start with, or to end with that movie and then go into episode 7. You know what I mean? It just makes more sense to watch them in chronological order, where it's like, okay, the last movie I saw, the Empire was a thing. Luke Skywalker was a big deal. All this stuff. Vader was cremated on Endor, and then you go to the next movie where Vader's cremated helmet is like in possession of his grandson. And you see the desert planet of Jakku with the scars of the Empire, with all the downed Star Destroyers. It just makes more sense for the audience, for people to watch that in chronological viewing, right? And, that's like a big, and some people might say, like, okay, well, just watch the 6 George Lucas Star Wars movies, start with episode 4, end with episode 3, then just do whatever the heck you want. And I'm just, in my head, I think, like, there's definitely movies that Disney's done that I'm not a fan of. But that doesn't mean that somebody else won't enjoy them. And I think that it's best served for that person to start with Phantom Menace and end with The Rise of Skywalker, just so they get the in-order viewing experience. And heck, if you have the time for it, definitely like throw Solo and Rogue One in the mix, right? I mean, like, you get all the movies kind of in order there. And here's the other thing, like, because some people might be like, why the heck would you throw Solo in there? My whole thing is like, it's a cool expansion on the galaxy. I actually really enjoyed Solo. Like the first time we see Chewbacca, don't forget, because if you're doing the chronological thing, Chewbacca shows up in episode 3, right? So if people are paying attention to the movies, like this is a character that we've already met at one point, and like he says goodbye to Yoda when Yoda leaves Kashyyyk, right? I don't know. I think like it's kind of neat, like seeing him show up in Solo and seeing that character story continue and have like Solo kind of like fleshed out, or and Lando pops up, and you get kind of an origin to the Falcon. And so like when Han Solo comes into the cantina in episode 4, it's just like there's some pre-existing history there, and you kind of have an idea for what this character is like. And even though he's grown older and more cynical now and this and that, that he's a good guy. And I don't know, I like that about the viewing order.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like I would definitely be inclined to say, okay, go watch episodes 1 till 9 first, and then go back, do the spin-off movies, which I think there's only 2. There's Rogue One and Solo, isn't there? There's nothing else.
There's
at
only
this stage.
the 2. There's only the 2.
I don't think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. The only slight exception I might say to that, because that's what I would suggest. Do 1 till 9, then go do the spin-off movies, then do the TV shows, and that's a whole discussion about what order you should do those. Mm-hmm. But the only slight exception I probably would add to that is like go 1 to 3, and then somehow get a combined version of A New Hope and Rogue One, and watch Rogue One first, going into A New Hope as like a 5-hour or 6-hour cut, or however long, 4-hour cut, however long that goes. Yeah, and then go from there, because like that it kind of works mildly that way. Right. I think, and then go and do 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9. But that's obviously for a viewer to just getting into Star Wars to do that. That's a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Just do 1 to 9, and then go back to the spin-offs and all that. And then you can, after you've done that and you've watched all the spin-offs, you can then watch the spin-offs of the spin-offs, which is the Bad Batch, which is what we're watching right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, how would you introduce people to like the Mandalorian, stuff like that? Like, would you start them off with the animated shows, pre-existing lore for like the Darksaber and a lot of the stories that continue in the live action shows, or would you just jump straight to the live action shows and then do animated after?
Well, look, it depends on the viewer, because I know there's a lot of people out there that have a bit of a like stigma when it comes to animated shows being like, oh, they're just for kids and they're not for adults. I think I would stick, depending on the person, I would stick by saying start off with the live action shows. But what I would definitely do is like once they've finished episodes 1 till 9, I would have to give them a map and be like, where on the galaxy timeline would you like to start off with? And then they would get to pick what shows they would do, because it's just too. I feel like it's just too complicated, and there's just so much content for someone that's just starting out Star Wars. So
it is.
I would honestly, I would go off and say do Rogue One and Solo first, get all the movies done, then probably look into the Mandalorian after that, because that's a pretty popular show. Then Andor, Boba Fett, Ahsoka.
Here's
now I'm jumping all over the place. Here's Ahsoka. You need to do Clone Wars.
Right.
Scratch that.
Scratch that. Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like okay, in a perfect world, I would start someone off with like the Acolyte, and then like go through Tales of the Jedi or the relevant episodes, and then Phantom Menace, and then continue going, up till Attack of the Clones.
Wow.
And then I in a perfect world, that's how I would show someone Star Wars. But here's the real thing, right? So there's people that like did this over COVID for the MCU. They started with Captain America or Eternals. Yeah, Eternals. Yeah, and then Captain America, so on and so forth. Captain Marvel, such and such, all the way up to Endgame, right? And the real like thing for me is like, would that be technically in your like, because I mean, to someone out there who might prefer Star Wars in the release order over chronological, what would their perspective be on the MCU? Because technically, those same people have lived through, the process of Iron Man being the first MCU film onwards through Captain America, all that stuff. Is that the way that that same person would prefer somebody to watch the MCU? Or would that same person prefer the MCU chronological order, which technically does make more sense? Because like where the Tesseract is in every single movie, it's like, what the heck's going on? And it just makes so much more sense to watch the movies in order, in proper chronological order. And like, to me, like that's kind of like the ideal way to watch the MCU, is just definitely to just start from chronological and go through it. Just kind of makes more sense in my head.
What's interesting is that in saying that, I think the way Disney wants newcomers to watch it is 100% in chronological timeline order, because if you jump onto Disney Plus, the only section that they have is Star Wars in timeline order. And it has Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, the Clone Wars TV show, then Revenge of the Sith, Bad Batch, Solo, Kenobi, Rebels, Andor, Rogue One, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and then Resistance, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and then Rise of Skywalker. So I think, and there's no Tales of the Jedi in there, because that kind of jumps around all the place in terms of timeline and stuff. So I feel like that's the order they probably would recommend people to watch things in, at least in terms of if you're going to do everything. But that would be fascinating, because I think one of the more common or most common famous movies of all time that's completely out of any sci-fi universe stuff that's in non-chronological order is from at least in my opinion, is Pulp Fiction. Like that's a very that movie jumps around all within a 1-2 hour spot, and I think the story is told better that way. But I could totally see the argument of how these stories can be told in a better way if you watch it chronologically. Right. But it's interesting, because when you are watching something, like let's say when we're watching The Acolyte, for example, actually the Acolyte wouldn't be able to do it, because that's completely well before the Phantom Menace. Let's say if when we were watching Ahsoka maybe, or even Mandalorian might be probably better. When they reference something in the Mandalorian, for example, I'm going to make a fake example here, but let's say one of the characters talk about this group called the First Order that's rising from the shadows or something. And if I, as a viewer, have not watched 7, 8, and 9 yet, I would have no idea what that means, and I would just gloss that over because that's like nothing. But if I've already watched episode 7, 8, and 9, and then someone mentions the First Order and the Mandalorian, and I've already seen 7, 8, and 9, I was like, that's a reference to what's going to happen, and you can kind of make that connection. Right. Versus if you're watching it for the first time, you have no idea what the First Order might. It's a pretty crude example, I guess, and a made up example, but I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I see what you mean, though. It's almost like if someone were to watch Andor and hasn't seen any other Star Wars, right? You get this character, Saw Gerrera, showing up, and they introduce him in a very like special way, like almost like it's as if it's your first time seeing the character, but it's really not. The first time anyone saw that character was actually in Clone Wars. He first had his appearance in Clone Wars, and then for the majority of people were probably introduced to that character in Rogue One, in which they saw a very older, different variation of that character. And then going back to Rebels, they did Rebels afterwards around the same time as Rogue One, and they make it kind of seem as like, okay, now that's some other people's first time seeing that character, and like there's some history there that he has with people and stuff like that. But yeah, there's an entry point for a lot of people, and most of the time it's probably not going to be the Phantom Menace. And some people's introduction to Star Wars, like you're saying, like is probably one of these live action shows or whatever. And yeah, I guess it can be like confusing if there's references that aren't necessarily, or maybe it might go over their head if they haven't seen like other material like that happens like chronologically later or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, is it really crucial to know what that Easter egg is or that reference is, like in regards to like the story at hand? I think a lot of the Star Wars chapters, like they're designed to be their own movie, right? So like someone can watch Attack of the Clones and kind of like know what's going on, because like there's an opening crawl that explains just kind of the plot going into the movie, and then you watch the movie and it resolves by the end and sets up a plot for a later point. And like there's always like a well-designed movie, even in a larger saga, still has to be its own movie, in its own story, kind of within the context of everything else. And that's kind of where the beauty of Star Wars is. Like wherever somebody decides to jump in, you know, if they're invested enough, they'll discover that stuff eventually. But so yeah, I guess overall, I mean, like there's really no right answer to like how you can watch a movie series. After all, at the end of the day, it's just a movie series. But I mean, here we are talking about it every single week. So
I think I know. I think the correct answer is that everyone that has not seen Star Wars should start off with episode 1, season 1 of The Bad Batch, and then just go from there, and then just see and just see where everything goes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and maybe the fandom will die if people start like that, but. Not to slam the Bad Batch.
You know what? Actually, what's interesting though is that like with the Acolyte coming up now, this is like the first time where we, apart from I guess when episode 7, 8, and 9 came out, this is the first time where we don't have we know what comes after this show, but we don't know what has really come before this show, which is an interesting, and also the time period is something that hasn't been explored yet, which is something we haven't, I guess, started off since like 2015 when Force Awakens came out.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's super exciting, and like, hold on, I'm gonna get your 2 cents on that in just a moment. I'm just gonna wrap up what we were talking about with Bad Batch. Somehow we got off on the sidetracked a little bit. There's not too much to say about this episode, to be honest. But I did want to bring up one thing that we missed, which was towards the end of the episode, Fennec betrays the Bad Batch by like getting on a holo call with a mysterious person. And I just wanted to ask you, which by the way, the space station they're on is like super sick. But I just wanted to ask you like what you thought of this voice clip.
I just finished a job with some clones. They were asking about the Empire's M-count bounties. What can you tell me? I'm sure you can track them down easily enough. I'll send you what I have.
Okay, so from the season trailer, and real quick spoiler for anyone who didn't see the trailer for season 3. Like we do know that Ventress is going to be in the Bad Batch season 3, and I'm just kind of wondering, and I was hoping that it would just be a flashback thing, but I'm just kind of wondering, like, do you think that this is Ventress's introduction to the story, or like how, like what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think definitely is. I'd be surprised if there's no other way that they would introduce Ventress to this, and also it has to do with M count, and I'm sure Ventress has a decent idea of what M count is, and it's related, so I feel like it has to be her that she's on that Skype call with.
Yeah. I think like a lot of people are speculating it's Ventress. And like you can't even like hear the voice. So I would assume that it probably is. Like they're just trying to hide it for people who like, you know, haven't seen the trailer or whatever. So, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I got to say about it. Should we do Pablo Points of Poodoos?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Pablo.
I would say, go for it.
Oh yeah,
I really have to go through the explanation again.
Yeah. For new listeners, Pablo Points Poodoos is our rating system on the podcast. We got a rating out of 7. 3 Pablo Poodoos is the absolute worst. Moving up from there, you got 2 Pablo Poodoos, 1 Pablo Poodoo, and then a Bendu, which is a 50% score. And then you got Pablo Points, which is 1 Pablo Point, 2 Pablo Points, and then 3 Pablo Points being the best of the best of the best. So what would you award this one, Kirk?
I'm gonna go midway. I'm gonna go with a Bendu on this one. I think it was nice to see some stuff with Crosshair and Omega. And I think I'm getting a little bit I think it's getting a little bit drawn out with Hunter and Wreckage going off on side quests and things like that. But
Right.
doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Just I want to go right flat in the middle.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Bendu as well. Like I didn't hate the episode, but definitely didn't really grip me all that much. And it was cool it's cool to see Fennec back. But I mean, to be like, she's not really my favorite character, even though she is like super awesome. But it's not enough to really like make this episode like great. You know what I mean? So like it was really neat to see her again, and I think that's the only reason why it's still at a Bendu for me. But so yeah. So anyone who's curious and seeing our scores, like kind of dating back for the whole season so far, you can go to our podcast archive spreadsheet, which there's a link in the description below, And there's a couple different tabs on that spreadsheet that you can click through. One of them is the publishing tracker, which tracks all the episodes that we've ever released, whether they're AI transcribed or, the YouTube links, all that stuff. It's all there. Release dates. And you'll find a tab for a spreadsheet called Pablo Points of Poodoos. And if you hit that, there's a team average of what we rate all the different things. And you can see whether or not we've given it a Poodoo or a Pablo Point or a Bendu or whatever. There's also a spreadsheet called Rebels Talk, which if anyone who's curious and going through Star Wars Rebels wants to know which part in the sub-series that we've done, like which episodes to watch and all that stuff, it's always in the description of those episodes, but this spreadsheet just kind of tracks what Star Wars Rebels episodes we talked about in which podcast episode. So if you know how to read that. So it's I don't know, it's a good resource for anyone who's actively going through Star Wars Escape Pod podcast episodes. So yeah, just a quick run on that. But that's all we got for the Bad Batch. So yeah, let's talk about the Acolyte, and then I just got a quick headline, and then we'll wrap it up. So what were you saying about the Acolyte? What were you saying before?
I'm quite interested in the show because it's a time period we haven't explored yet.
Right.
Not in terms of novels, but in terms of visually on screen. So I know you guys talked about it last week, but I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. It's a very early trailer.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand yet how they're going to fit in the fact that they haven't. I thought there weren't any Sith spotted for like a 1,000 years or something. I think Kiadi Mundi said we haven't seen any Sith for millennia, but this is only 100 or so years before Phantom Menace. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, I'm optimistic about the show just because it's all this stuff that's quite new, and I really love the I've already forgotten the actor's name, but I really love the actor that played in Squid Games.
Lee.
I've completely forgotten it.
Yeah, I know. It's Lee something.
Lee Jung Jae.
Lee Jung Jae. Yeah.
I think he's a great actor. One of my favorite characters in Rogue One was Donnie Yen's character. And he kind of has a similar screen presence as him. I think both being more famous from internationally produced films and TV. So I'm looking forward to him. I like that last shot in the trailer with all those lightsabers popping up. I don't think I've seen that many lightsabers in a movie since the prequels.
Right.
But I think they didn't really show too much in the trailer, and I'm curious to see where this goes. But I will be there to watch it on opening day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get. Well, I'm sorry you won't be able to be there, but I'll have the Escape Pod crew over at my place. We'll do the typical premiere launch thing.
I think it needs to be fair. We're going to do it one day in Australia. Make it a little bit easier commute, because every time I do this podcast, I got to fly up to your end.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Anyone who's in our Discord server, there is a thread opened up under the Chat by Era category. You'll find it under the High Republic. It is a thread called The Acolyte, and there's a couple good little tidbits in there. Around here in North America, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is being re-released in theaters for the 25th anniversary. And for those of you who are going to that showing on May 3rd, 4th, or 5th, over that weekend, we'll get an exclusive look at the upcoming Disney Plus series, The Acolyte, in the theater. And there's a new poster that they released to kind of advertise that. So I think tickets are possibly coming out soon. May 3rd is not that far away. So I feel like within the next 2 or 3 weeks, anyone just keep an eye on those ticket sales at your local theater, and hopefully there is a screening. There's also photos I've dropped in there for the Acolyte. There's one that came out, I think, on StarWars.com or something like that, which is pretty cool. And episode release dates. Episode 1 and 2 come out June 4th together, and then it's one per week after that until the finale, which is episode 8 on July 16th. So like most other live action Star Wars shows, it's 8 episodes long, and this time we get 2 at once in the beginning, which is cool. So I'm pretty excited to see this. So shout out to our 2 people in that thread who've been piping up, Captain Lightspeed and I don't know how to pronounce that, Vlad Sander. Thanks guys for keeping the activity going. So cool. That's great. So I'm looking forward to seeing that show. Great to get your 2 cents. Are you at all worried for this show?
Look, I'm I'm worried whenever a new show or movie comes out because there's just so much that can go wrong and there's so much that can go right. But like I said, like it's a very short trailer, and I'm trying to ignore a lot of the negativity that there is online and also the positivity too. I'm quite keen to just go into this pretty fresh and with an open mind.
Yeah, awesome. Very quick Star Wars headlines, then we'll wrap it up. April 14th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Republic Commando, the vintage, well, now it's vintage, I guess. It goes to show how old we are. The Republic Commando video game is being binge streamed on a friend of mine's Twitch channel, Yoshiman222. I'm going to be in there. We're going to be chatting about Republic Commando. Going to be watching him play through it, and that is going to be in the description with the details. Podcast news, those of you following on Spotify, Apple, reviews are great. 5 stars are awesome. Definitely subscribe on the YouTube, and let's see. Check out old episodes. I mean, like I mentioned the Star Wars podcast archives, which are really good at kind of going back, and you can see just every episode we've done. There's like 315 episodes, Kirk, of Star Wars Escape by now. It's like, it's crazy, dude. Been doing this for a while.
Well, so at what point do you have to start listening to those in the Star Wars timeline? Chronological order or in
in release order? Start from the intro and go up until right now. Yeah. Hours and hours.
I need to go back and listen to the first one.
Yeah, hours and hours of content. And a lot of it is very like content specific, not as much as some Star Wars podcasts very reliant on like the current news and stuff like that. And like we do touch up on the news every now and again, just like we have right now. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of the older episodes are still quite good. They still hold up pretty well. So definitely check those out. You can key search on the spreadsheet for keywords, subjects you might be interested in. You might see something pop up you like. Also, Battlefront Classic Collection has been re-released under Aspire. There's been a patch or two which has gotten things kind of working a little bit for the initial release, which initially things were breaking a lot. You big Battlefront fan, Kirk? Any memories from the PS2?
I'm looking forward to. I haven't downloaded the re-release, so I'm keen to play that. That's on the checklist.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Well, for those of you curious, Battlefront is out, so you can relive the glory days, and that's all we got. So thanks so much, dude, for coming back on, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Great to be back. I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right, and thank you so much to all of you guys tuning in. As you know, the email is swescapepodcast@gmail.com. We really do love to hear from people listening to the podcast and throwing in your reviews and, just your opinions on what you thought of the Bad Batch and, theories that you might have. Just feel free to send your 2 cents in, and, we might even talk about it on the show. Also, join the Discord. Links in the description. That's where we want the conversation to happen outside of this live show every week. It's not really live, but we try to make it as live as possible. So send us a follow on the Twitter using the handle @SWEscapepodcast. That's in the description below. Go check out Alki lightsabers, Orbit Key, all that stuff. You know the deal. We'll see you in the next episode. May the Force be with you.